Welcome back, everyone, to theCUBE. We're here at our New York Stock Exchange CUBE studios. Obviously, this is our now East Coast hub. We have Palo Alto, and we're connecting Silicon Valley and Wall Street, of course, working with Brian Bauman and the NYSE, creating the New York Stock Exchange Wired community. You see a lot of emails from Brian and the team, of course, building a trust network and covering as much content as we can. This week, AWS was in New York for the summit, and we've been programming around it with our AI cloud leaders. Mark Castleman, Managing Director at Intel, is here as part of that leader series. Knows a lot about technology and money and culture. Mark, great to have you back on theCUBE. We saw each other in Maui for the Actai pop-up cube, my personal cube. Now we're in the studio. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Yeah, not too shabby. Open outcry option trading. A lot of green over there, except for Tesla in the red. I really thank you for coming in. I really appreciate it, because at AWS this year, it's the summit. It's a free event. It's usually their marquee conference for practitioners. It's free, and it's really about learning. It's New York. It's everybody. So everyone's in town. This year, it felt like a full-blown reInvent event, which is their flagship primary event. Major news announcements, Nova model with customization. They had Agent Core, a full platform, and then also a marketplace separate group for listing agents and tools. And they even had good news of this Kiro application, which is a developer kind of environment. Matt Garman had to release it the day before. So it's like, I won't say throwaway news, but like they like curtain raised it with that. So, I mean, pretty significant news. This would headline any conference.
Right.
And this is a mid-year halftime report, which is part of our show, covering it. So it's our digital twin. This means that the reInvent, in our opinion, is probably going to be massive. So it just speaks to some of the things we talked about at the Raise Summit when we were there, about how much innovation is going on the first half of the year. If this is the early preview of AWS, what we saw at Raise and what you've been working on and seeing, it's significant. What is your take? It feels like almost a pinch me moment. Like, I don't believe it's almost this happening.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's I think everybody is trying to figure out the enterprise AI execution game. And what works is people are on the hunt for what's going to work. There have been a lot of things that folks have tried that didn't quite work. So there've been this kind of delicate imbalance between the pursuit of productivity and AI for enterprise and the actualization of that have not quite aligned. So if you look at what's happening in the agentic space and the tools and the pursuit is the idea that the benefit to enterprises in the workflow, and agents are perfect for workflow. And workflow and workflow optimization and decisioning inside of workflow is exactly what a collection of agents can do very effectively. But it's hard because you have to understand the workflow. So it's not like an AI can just go in and say, oh, I've got this solved. There's going to be, in a simple workflow, you could have 20 agents, 40 agents, 50 agents, and then all of the boundary markers kind of making sure that no one goes wild in any one of those steps. So as a practical matter, it's actually way more complicated than people give it credit for, but those that solve it win massively. And
so it's a big winning.
It's a big win. It's a very big win. Now, the thing that's coupled to agents that I also like to talk about are all the APIs. So from another perspective, once the agents can start wiring up all the available APIs, then you have a monetization path for infrastructure, which is also really interesting because there's a lot of infrastructure sitting out there underutilized. And if the agents can kind of get their act together and we can figure out how to wire them up and consume the APIs, you have a nice business model. Very, very nice business model.
What are some of the things that they could wire up? Give an example, because I think that's a really good point. Yeah. If you look at like, I'm going to throw back my memory, but grid computing was a concept of the 90s that carried forward. The concept was grid, computers talk to each other. What you just basically talked about is grid computing, where the grid of available resource, if connected, can be optimized.
Yes, yeah.
Away. So explain where you see that happening. Where would it wire up in the infrastructure?
Well, so as a backdrop for that, what I would say is that if you think about the app economy and what happened in the app world is that you had a product manager that was trying to develop the best set of functionality and experiences for the broadest number of people, okay, one to many. And those apps were consuming services, API services, maybe they're trading data or pushing and pulling instructions to a network or getting banking information or, getting health information. They're basically dipping into a lot of different data stores to get information or to trigger activity. So that happened in an app. Well, if you dissolve the app and put that capability into an agent and put that agent with a collection of other agents in a workflow, you get app-like functionality out of a sequence of agents. Those agents are also going to consume APIs. So they're going to turn up and turn down services. They're going to push and pull data. They're going to make calculations. They're going to execute other agents to do other things in some kind of additional workflow. So think of the agent construct as these things are working around as a deconstruction of a single app. But now I can do it for myself. So I don't have to have a single app doing it for 100,000 people. I have one collection of, or maybe a collection of agents doing something for me. Now, the cool thing there is that I have an account at, let's see, my mobile provider. I have an account at my bank. I have health data. So my agent can sort of talk to all of these different things and push and pull data, and then set appointments or make trades or do other things based upon other activity. So that's when I'm talking about the agents will start to activate access to these things. The folks that are running the APIs, whether it's the financial services firms or the healthcare companies or the transportation companies, they now have a completely new revenue model to expose those APIs as access so that the billions or trillions of agents that are out there can start using them. And that is why this is such a massive, massive push, because if you can become a greater hub of agent activity, then you can trade into those APIs, and maybe there's a toll. Okay.
Yeah.
So, or value.
They already put a toll up already.
They put a toll up already. So, I think the data guys are in good shape. I think the API guys are in fantastic shape. The constructing the agents is still a pursuit. And but it's getting better and better and better. And then once you expose that to not just the PMs at a product company, but everyone, then it's going to change how networks work, how service consumption is perceived and actualized, and it's a whole new world. Yeah. And so I'm not sure anybody exactly knows how it's going to go down, but certainly going to be super interesting.
You and I have talked about this being, looking at historical waves of innovation. We've seen many waves. This one's huge. The one thing that's always present is the enthusiasm of alpha nerds and geeks. Yeah. And I got to say, people right now who are technical or have been in the industry, all get it. Yeah. Like they see it, and they're not just saying, oh, this is the next big thing. They're actually super enthusiastic and excited, smiling, digging in, rolling up their sleeves, getting on board and like enjoying it, like literally surfing the wave and like having fun, getting high off.
Yes.
I mean, it's intoxicating. It's intellectually. Exciting. If you're in, do you agree with that? And what would you observe if you can look around? I mean, some people are scared. They might be on the wrong side of this, but if you're on the right side, like the Amazonian talent, they're having a field day here. I was just like, they're like senior people, technical people, just like grinning, loving life right now.
We talked about this before, where if you ever want to identify transformational movements, you have to look at how good they can be and how scary they can be. And the greater the greater the delta there, the greater the cultural impact. So if things can be really, really bad and really, really good, something is
the symmetry, the symmetrical polarization means it's big.
It's big. It's going to affect culture, and things that affect culture are by and large just orders of magnitude more valuable and more impactful and impact more people. So in this case, whether let's say you're a more senior entrepreneur or new to the game, it's really exciting because you can turn something very specific into $1 billion business, and you can very quickly put value into the marketplace and capture that value and do the next thing, like faster than ever. And there's no longer like this 5, 7, 10-year window. It's really more of like, 1, 3, 5-year window.
Yeah.
Everything has compressed because you can achieve value much sooner.
It's almost scary if as an entrepreneur, because almost you have FOMO about not being on time with the wave. I'm like,
Right.
or do I go too slow? Remember the old days, run fast,
Yeah.
mover advantage.
Right.
Those things are situational. First mover advantage has certain advantages in markets that have characteristics. What's your take on this? Because I'm a student of competitive strategy. One of my little hobbies is like, what's a good strategy? How do I compete? And what's a moat? You got all kinds of new changing variables around what used to be yesterday's competitive strategy. Open source. There's no real proprietary moat there. That's been gone for a long time. NVIDIA, we always debate about their moat. Is it a moat, or is it just scale? Or what is a moat? I mean,
big moat.
I mean, so what's your take on this? Because I think there's a new kind of set of forces.
Right.
Even Amazon, I scratch my head and go, what's in Andy Jassy's head? Because he just did a video on. He's not even in charge of it. He still loves AWS. He's done a video on Agent Core and really describing the benefits. He's excited. This affects Amazon. What's their strategy? Just continue to sell more? So like this could hurt them. They could cannibalize them. Or they could win big. Maybe they're from your camp. Win big.
Yeah, it's a big, these are defining moments, because it's like part of that race where people are, the winners are going to become more energized, and the ones that aren't going to win are going to be confused. And so clarity is super important. Quickly making decisions, being clear about what you're trying to achieve, and then executing towards that is super important. Any kind of pause is gonna be a major problem. It used to be, hey, first mover advantage, I'm first to market or whatever. Now it's the first news of the day. So you literally have to be kind of the early bird that gets the worm at the beginning of the day, because by the end of the day, something could have changed that could affect your entire business. And what was it, the company, Windsurf, that just went through this like 3-day, acquisition, cut a deal, do a partnership in 3-day cycle, and multiple billions of dollars involved. And that kind of velocity is just unbelievable to imagine at that scale. But that's what it's going to take to gain ground. But it is exciting.
What do you think about a couple things? Obviously, you saw the Meta big movement around offering people $100 million. There's a lot of flack that basically the investors almost got nothing from the Acquihire deal on Scale AI and other deals. And then you got TSMC's earnings are out, up 61% on net income. They've been beating estimates every quarter since 2021. They're upping their construction on Arizona, the Silicon Desert play, where Intel has a factory, you know that. And then, so these are some of the headlines. And ChatGPT debuts their agent, which can take over your computer. So you just gave a talk at MIT on agents. You see the expansion of the infrastructure in the U.S. from TSMC. You see the hiring piece. It kind of speaks to the culture we're living in. I mean, information claims that they call it like free agents, but we were the first ones to say tech athletes, and that they were like free agents. But it's happening. The ESPN of tech is happening. And there are now tech athletes on a 4-year contract.
That's right. That's right. It's kind of the $100 million contract. We should.
It's a 4-year cliff. Go.
It's only. It won't be long before Congress gets involved and starts collective bargaining and all this stuff on the athletic tech. The tech athlete. That's a very interesting concept. Actually, that's a business there, by the way. We should become agents for that business that we could represent.
If you're a PhD student, contact us. We got you. You'll be the Scott Boras.
NIL for tech bros and gals that want to go do the $100 million deals with Zuckerberg.
Well, if you look at ESPN's history, they really broke out when free agency hit sports, because they were an up and coming broadcaster, and the agents came on a lot.
I'm telling you,
this leaking a lot of information to the.
That's right. There's something there for sure. Well, if you think about the overall context of the land grab is an overused term, but obviously the capture value side is so critical. You have to aggregate the best possible resources, and that's why it's acquiring whether it's compute, power, data, and humans.
Yeah, I think that's the moat question right there. Power could be a moat, data's a moat.
Humans and team and intellectual strength has always been a moat. And it's harder and harder, I believe, to create a moat in that space as the tools become easier and easier to use. And if you're leveraging AI, this notion of a 10x engineer is sort of obliterated. Okay, so I don't know.
In what way? Because that was a cloud construct?
Well, because the idea was that all of the capability was encapsulated into a single human who was just unique in their ability to execute in ways that other people couldn't. But a lot of that 10x capability, which is access and experience, is encapsulated now in AI models. And so what does that mean in terms of what these individual people are capable of doing for any specific business? And I think that's a degrading piece of material over time, because the other capabilities just catch up so fast. But I get why they do it. I totally get why they do it. And it's hard to argue with it when you realize that the prize is it's a huge prize. So, imagine 2 years out and, Facebook, sadly to use that example, I'm not trying to clear where it's going, but if it's a big win, that looks like a super insanely smart spend.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
I mean, if everything's open and free, then a moat like having the most GPU intelligence horsepower could be an advantage. If you have data moat and you then can configure it properly, then that can be a moat. Now, I've got a whole nother perspective on this, because if you asked me a year ago, or even a half a year ago, I would have said, like our business, theCUBE, like, I need to have a GPU farm, I'm going to do a deal with Lambda, I'm going to go crack and get arms rate. I need arms, I need nukes.
Yeah.
If you look at what Amazon just announced and what we're hearing in the AI circle, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, is that the LLM might be passé in the sense of it being the monster of value. And let me give you an example. One of the big trends this year that's emerged is MCP. Now you got A2A, agent to agent, for multiple agents swarming. The other big surprise is tooling is growing huge. In fact, Amazon has an agent and tooling section of marketplace that's so popular. And what they're doing with tooling right now is using a FinOps model to say, hey, let's maximize our token. Why ask basic math to LLM and burn tokens? Let's use the tokens for abstract reasoning only.
Yes,
and then create software layers with tooling and agents to plumb out non-related requests that tokens don't need to be used for. Yeah, and I'll use compute for that. I got plenty of compute. I mean, Intel's in the compute business, so this could be a dynamic that could change conventional wisdom of overbuild with the GPUs.
Yes. Okay. So,
what's your thoughts on that?
Man,
am I crazy?
That is no. You're spot on. Okay. So, it starts with this. It used to be like throw everything at the LLM and just kind of deal with the cost of, because it's so good. But now, to your point, if you take any prompt, you do an analysis, reasoning analysis of the prompt to determine which model you need to use based upon the price of the model. Yeah. So some prompts don't require the big model, right? And they don't require deep research, or they don't require these other things. So you can get a really good output for very low cost very quickly. But now if you turn around and you take a much more complicated prompt, reasoning analysis on that prompt says, hey, this is a very difficult problem. It doesn't answer the problem. It just understands the complexity and says, I'm going to give this to a much more capable model. Token cost goes up, time goes up, but the probability you get a good answer also goes up. Yeah. So that's sort of like a traffic cop to figure out where you put this stuff. And the whole idea there is to lower costs and increase the probability you get a good answer for the lowest price. Now, the problem in that is that not all tokens are equal, okay? So this whole idea that token cost is coming down is true, but what that demonstrates is that the tokens that come out for one prompt have a different cost per token per watt than the tokens that come out for another prompt. So how do you know in advance what the cost of any particular response is? And this is the problem for enterprise, because if you have an outcome you're trying to achieve and you're trying to build an implementation that has a benefit that you can quantify, you also have to know what the cost is. Well, if you don't know the cost, you can't uncalculate ROI, so you have unlimited risk, basically. So this is what's killing enterprise AI. That's why POCs are dying. The implementation of AI in enterprise.
Active trading behind us. Right?
They're trading.
That's it. NVIDIA's up again.
I can't help but think about trading places. When I say. So
brokers back in here. Turn those machines back on.
Exactly. So, I mean, look, it's a long-winded way of saying that until you can simulate in advance and be aware of the cost per token for any particular outcome you're trying to achieve, you don't really know if you're getting a benefit.
I mean, basically, my point, you agree, so what you're bringing up too is that we still don't know what the ideal configuration will be, or it could be very ad hoc runtime, right? It could be agent driven based upon some programmability.
Yeah, most enterprise POCs go like this. Hey, I would like to do XYZ, fraud detection, churn reduction, deepfake detection, whatever. Okay, so let's go stand up a bunch of compute at some amount and then throw that at the problem and see what happens. And I will tell you, there's a lot of disappointment in that approach, because what happens is very different or the cost of how to get to what happens is not what is expected. Okay. Yeah. So then the projects get killed. So I think as we drive out the ambiguity of the cost per token per watt, you get closer to what compute do I need? What model do I need? Where does it need to run? How close does it need to be to the things that I need to access for time and, return?
At the end of the day, the KPI is task completion.
Task completion at a price over time that has a probability near, perfect. And so some outputs require 100%, in a probabilistic model, maybe the model isn't even what you need. You need some deterministic approach. So it's not clear that the LLM solves all the problem, which I think is kind of the point. However, what's really cool is that there are good enough models that give you very good answers that can run very tiny in different places, consuming less compute. And if you bound it with the right prompts and the right guardrails, you can get really good answers out of that. So that fit your workflow. Mm-hmm. So this leads to a distribution effect. So you can distribute your compute requirements out onto the network. And that was why I was at MIT, because Ramesh Raskar, who has this lab there, is working on this thing called NANDA, which is this distributed approach.
Explain what you give a talk to. Explain what was the event?
Yeah.
What was your talk? Who was there? What was the vibe? Yeah, you're like a reporter. Good go. Give us the data.
Yeah, on the ground. I'll tell you how it was. It was a cold day that day. No, it was super hot in Boston, but it's essentially the idea that eventually disaggregation occurs. Eventually things spread out. Okay, they start out concentrated and then they spread out. And now that's kind of like a physics model, right?
Yeah.
So, but this is true with tech, with let's say cultural impact, financials, etc. Things tend to spread out. So the theory is that eventually the compute will spread out, the models will spread out, the capability will go out to where it needs to go, and this concentration is artificial. All right. So my talk was not necessarily about that specific thing, but in that possible reality, what can you do now that can work in both? And so you mentioned MCP. MCP is a protocol, but my talk was more like a framework. So if you
framework
for agents. So I called it the PCM. So it was like a cute little reversal. So prompt, context, and model. So this is a framework, not a protocol. So the key in a workflow is a prompt. The prompt is the human understanding of the workflow, okay? Yeah. So you still need a human to write the prompt. And your prompt is actually your greatest guardrail for any output that you get from a model. Now, in a workflow, we built some of this for Intel, is that if you take a single use case, we have this query engine where the agent, the agentic tool, steps you through the workflow, and at each point collects more prompts that it knows about that particular spot in the workflow and asks the human, are we getting closer and closer and closer to this finish? Okay, so we can take a workflow that takes 4 to 6 weeks and we can do it in 10 minutes because we have 100 prompts that know the questions to ask at each stage. We got a constellation of models that are checking the data that comes out. We've loaded all of our historicals on this particular problem, so we know what the metrics are that are good and the metrics that are not so good. And as we tune this thing, at the end of it, in 10 minutes, I can get a full-blown CSP class.
So PCM is the acronym.
Prompt context model. Prompt is the human understanding of the workflow. Context is understanding the impact.
So on your use
model
case,
is model.
by the way, first of all, that's a great illustration, but I have to just drill down on that. The assumption is that you have to have the domain knowledge of the workflow.
100%.
To have the prompt the person who actually is the domain user.
Yes, and that's how you build the agent.
Who sets that up?
Well, think about the agent is a proxy of the best person or collection of people in the world that can do that thing. Well, now we have to go get the people. And some people, so you can sort of synthesize this a little bit, but you still have to have a person looking at that going, yeah, this is how it works. It's almost like labeling on data, right? But you have to get the prompt correct. Okay. And that a human and an AI can build prompts. So there's prompt engineering and prompt synthesization. That's not a word, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And then what you can do is you can build this prompt. And if you're a human and you read the prompt, it should read like the most expert person trying to solve a problem. And then the model has access to the data. And the model can find the relationships between those
What's
questions.
interesting about MCP is it allows you to have that protocol
Yes.
do that. Now, what's come up with MCP is, because it's so popular, is they're everywhere. And so they're a node on the network,
Right.
and they're important and trusted nodes. So what came out of Amazon was, and some of the other people I talked to, was people were building their own MCP servers, and now Amazon's actually built a better one. An Amazon person told me, that was doing the MCP servers, to say, we just want to build the best one because we don't want people reinventing themselves. So what's happening is everyone's creating their own MCP servers from scratch.
Yeah, that's a huge problem too, because security is a problem. I've seen issues where, I'm using MCP to solve a problem, and the model's like, hey, that's a great answer for this other person. And it starts to sort of blend the output. And that is bad. Okay, so now you can't have like multi-tenant solutions and all this stuff. So it's everybody trying to do their own thing, roll their own, whatever you want to call it, can be a problem. Yes.
Mark, great to have you on. Just one final question. I know you always have a money side of the finance. You have a background in looking at the capital markets impact. Just as the speed happens,
right?
Is there any kind of black swan event coming in money side of it? Hedge fund, private equity, big country sovereign investors. I mean, you get the Middle East, you get China and the U.S. as I see as the three pillars of where AI is going to land. I would argue that the Middle East, they love their sovereignty and just want to sell oil to people. And AI is the new oil, as they say. But it's China and the U.S. So you got those three kind of axes. And then coming out of Paris, don't count the Europeans out. There's a revolution going on over there.
For sure.
The younger generation saying, hey, all you compliance people, all these rules, that's my vibe, by the way. There's no evidence other than me reporting that, but that's the vibe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Europe's like, we're going to be let on the cold. But right now it's the three.
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously the U.S. is in a very strategic position, but you're right. The Middle East has a lot of capital and a lot of desire, not only to play in that world, but to impact it and to build their own ecosystem. So not only they want an ecosystem locally, but they have, kind of export goals, and there's a big vision over there. China is clearly, they're pressing hard on power, compute. They want to be competitive, and they're going to be a competitor. And the U.S., has a great foundation built on it. And this is going to be the case for the next generation. But I wouldn't count out, like you said, Europe is really pressing hard to be in that game. I think they're in that game in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of great companies coming out. I've seen great companies coming out of France, Spain, and the UK, and not to leave the others out, but so many great entrepreneurial events coming out of there. As an investor, I look at that as an investable space. Entrepreneurs seek capital and they seek customers. So they're going to move around wherever the capital and the customers are. So where they end up is different than where they start often. But I think that, look, you're going to find innovation developed out of need.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of innovation going on there.
Yeah. Mark, thanks for coming on. You're a leader, managing director at Intel, but also you're out in the industry. Congratulations on that talk at MIT. I want to hear more about that later. But
Sure.
Thanks for coming on and being part of our AI Cloud program.
Yeah, you bet. Let's do it.
Okay, this has been the week, media week here at theCUBE and NYSE Wired around AWS Summit event, but all week we've been talking about AI and cloud, of course, generative AI, and has its line of sight on the economic value and continuing evolution of the infrastructure and business transformation. I'm John Furrier, host of theCUBE. Thanks for watching.